Welcome to the Marked for Revenge channel, where dramatic revenge stories begin with betrayal and end with a heavy price.
They called me a fraud in court. But what shattered me wasn't the accusation, it was hearing my own brother say it first. He didn't even hesitate. He stood there calm and certain and said, "My sister Aria Lennon forged everything." The room went silent. The judge lowered his eyes, and I realized that for everyone watching, his word carried more weight than my entire life. I wasn't just losing a case, I was being erased by my own blood. That was the moment something inside me broke, and another part, the one that had stayed quiet for years, finally woke up. Because if they wanted to bury Aria Lennon, they'd have to dig through the truth first. I used to believe the sea could wash away everything, grief, guilt, even shame. But some things cling too deep, like the stain of a name that no longer feels like yours. Mornings in Port Harrow always start the same: the smell of salt, the taste of bitter coffee, and the echo of a past that refuses to fade. My house still breathes my father's life wood, soaked in oil and sea wind, the photo of him in uniform, watching from the wall. His voice lives there, too low and steady in my head. Honor is the one thing you don't get to lose. I built my life around those words. I thought I'd protected them. But life has a cruel sense of irony. It doesn't test your honor when you're strong. It tests it when your own blood turns against you. The knock came early before sunrise. 3 sharp raps like gunfire. A man in a dark coat stood on the porch, frost on his sleeves. Aria Lennon, yes. Summons from the State Court of Augusta. The wax seal cracked under my thumb. Plaintiff Ethan Lennon. Defendant Aria Lennon. Charge federal contract fraud. Outside, the sea rolled on indifferent. My half-brother was suing me for $18 million of federal funds. I laughed once, quiet and hollow. My father had been dead 10 years, but his shadow still ruled this house. Now the son he'd worshipped most was using that legacy to bury me. I folded the summons, looked toward the waves. "If it's a war you want, Ethan," I whispered, "you'd better pray you've learned how to survive a storm." ChatGPT deny. They say a man can rewrite his will, but not the guilt that made him write it. The first meeting was at Graham M. and Lowell in Portland. Ethan arrived with Vivian, our stepmother, both polished and smug. They stood when I entered, but didn't offer a hand. Vivian smiled like someone testing poison. "Aria, it's been too long. We'd like to end this peacefully." Peace. The word almost made me laugh. "You sue me for $18 million and call that peace?" Ethan leaned forward, smooth as a lecturer. "Return the funds you took from Father's research account, the Marine Energy Project, and I'll withdraw the case." "Do you even know what that money was for?" I asked. "To build a fake company," he said. Their lawyer slid a document across the table, Father's will. Aria lacks the moral and financial integrity to continue. It wasn't his handwriting. I'd held his hand when it trembled too much to sign. After the meeting, Ethan whispered, "Accept it. Your honor was always just a family story." That night, Martha Keene, Father's old attorney, confirmed the truth. Someone used an angry draft and forged his signature. Only Ethan had access. At home, I found Father's letter. "Don't let honor kill you the way it killed me." I folded it. I wouldn't stay silent. The cruelest betrayal comes from the one who knows where to strike. On the second day of trial, Marshall Price walked in, my ex-husband, now standing with Ethan. His badge read, "Lennon Maritime Systems. Mr. Price will testify that she falsified contracts," the prosecutor said. "He's no longer an officer," I replied. "He doesn't understand the codes." "We have proof," counsel said. Marshall met my eyes. "You always thought you could protect everyone." "Still think so." That night, I opened my old files. Operation Eager Tide, a classified project to harvest ocean current energy for naval bases. Only 5 people had full clearance. Marshall was one. He'd stolen my access codes and sold them to Ethan. I could expose him, but I'd break federal law. Leaving court, a courier handed me an envelope from Norfolk. Inside, a photo of Marshall shaking Ethan's hand the day they sued me. In the corner, the faded seal of the Naval Security Division. I let out a quiet breath. "Thank you, Admiral. You're still watching." Silence used to be my armor. Now it felt like a noose tightening around my throat. 2 days after the first hearing, I woke to my phone ringing. Lila Croft's voice was urgent. "Turn on your TV." My face filled the national news screen, angled harshly beneath the headline, "Commander Lennon Fraud Behind the Navy Funds." A calm reporter said Aria Lennon, former Navy officer, accused of embezzling $18 million. Sources say she's hiding behind military secrecy to avoid prosecution. The coffee in my hand went cold. By noon, a van parked outside. A reporter in red shouted through my gate, asking if I had anything to say. I closed the door. Hours later, the clip aired my silence cut short, the caption beneath reading, "No comment, guilt confirmed." That afternoon, Lila arrived with her laptop. "Ethan hired Baylight PR," she said. "Marshall gave them your private files." On screen, Marshall appeared in a suit. Aria was brilliant, but obsessed with control. She said, "Without me, no one would remember the project." I turned it off. "I never said that." Lila nodded. "Then help me prove it. We need something from the Navy, something only you have." That night, I found an old email from Admiral Stonewall Operation Aegir Tide must remain sealed. "Your silence is your shield." That shield had become their weapon. Lila discovered the Aegir Tide files were erased the day Marshall left the Navy. They'd wiped me from history. "Silence isn't honor anymore," she said. "It's killing you." I looked at my father's picture. If I stay quiet now, they'll be right. Sometimes survival comes not from faith, but from an envelope that arrives too late and just in time. 3 mornings later, I found a yellow envelope in my mailbox. No return address, only the faded stamp of Norfolk Naval Command. Inside was a brittle document. "All expenses under Operation Aegir Tide are classified and undisclosable under any inquiry." Signed, Secretary of the Navy. It could clear me, but if I revealed it, I'd face charges for exposing defense secrets. Lila studied it. "That seal hasn't been used since 2000, she said. "Someone kept this hidden for 25 years. At the bottom was one name, Stonewall, my old superior, presumed dead near Greenland. That night, an unlisted call came. "Commander Lennon, it's Stonewall. Keep the letter. When the time comes, you'll know." Then he hung up. Next morning, cameras crowded the courthouse. Ethan smirked. "Heard you got a letter trying to hide behind the Navy again?" "No," I said. "This time you'll see who's really hiding." Before the hearing, Lila handed me a USB. Inside was footage of Ethan and Marshall leaving a naval site in 2005, carrying a metal case labeled Aegir Tide. For the first time, I wasn't alone. A 52-year-old woman branded a fraud and a 27-year-old reporter seeking justice, 2 strangers standing against a storm called truth. The courtroom smelled of old wood sweat and lies, but I knew truth had its own scent, the salt of the sea after a storm. Augusta was covered in fog that morning. I walked into court wearing a plain gray suit, a small navy pin on my lapel. No one looked twice. Across the aisle, Ethan, Vivian, and Marshall sat in the front row, surrounded by lawyers, who charged more per hour than I'd earned in a month of service. As I passed, Marshall murmured low enough for only me to hear. "Didn't think you'd show up." "You never understood me," I said. "I've sailed through hurricanes to save men you'd leave behind. You think I'm scared of you?" His smile disappeared. Judge Richard Hale entered, his voice rough as gravel. Aria Lennon charged with defrauding federal contracts under the Defense Budget Act. The prosecution presented spreadsheets too perfect to be real. "Where did this data come from?" I asked. "Internal files from Lennon Maritime provided by Marshall Price." I stared at him. He looked away. "Those records required command clearance. I left the Navy in 2005. Someone used my ID or forged it." "You're claiming someone hacked the Navy?" The prosecutor sneered. "No, someone who once wore the uniform. Lila, sitting in the back, texted me, proof Marshall logged in with your ID 4 days after you retired." "Your Honor, I requested to submit digital evidence gathered by an independent journalist." "You have 24 hours, the judge said." During recess, Ethan came close enough to whisper, "Still clinging to your Navy honor." "No one buys that anymore." "Because you never had any to lose," I said. He smiled thinly. "Honor doesn't pay dividends." When court resumed, I said calmly, "That information is classified under Navy authority." The room laughed. The judge pounded his gavel. Do you understand the gravity of this? I do. And I know the difference between secrecy and deceit. Later, Lila handed me a paper. A recording Admiral Stonewall's voice, Commander Lennon, authorized to proceed under classified directive. He was alive. I wasn't alone anymore. That night, his voice reached me through a private line. Commander Lennon, the seal's been lifted. Reveal the data. Open the black box. Why now? Because they've turned your silence into guilt. Let it speak for you. I unlocked the Atlantic box, a titanium drive I'd guarded for 2 decades. Inside was a single file, Tide Meeting, 2005. 4 people appeared, my father Ethan Marshall and me. Father's voice, transfer the funds to Lennon Maritime. It'll dodge inspection. I refused. That's Navy research money. Ethan sneered. Honor won't pay the bills. Father slammed the table. For this family's name, you'll stay silent. The recording ended with my voice. I'll stay silent, but not forever. Minutes later, Lila sent me another file. Marshall's voice whispered to Ethan after Father's death, Aria won't talk. She's too scared of breaking protocol. Her silence keeps us safe. The next morning, I carried the Atlantic box to court. A hard drive, the prosecutor mocked. Playing spy again. Number just returning what you buried 20 years ago. Judge Hale called a recess. As he passed me, his gaze caught my Navy pin. USS Halley, 2001, he said quietly. You pulled me from the water. I did what any commander would. He nodded, eyes bright with something like memory. When court reconvened, his tone was firm but different. The defendant may present her evidence publicly tomorrow. The room erupted. Ethan's face drained of color. Marshall dropped his head. I placed my hand over the insignia on my chest. For the first time in years, the voice inside me was steady. Commander Lennon back on duty. I never needed them to believe me. I only needed one man to say the word, proceed. That morning, the Augusta courthouse overflowed. Cameras flashed like lightning, catching faces that once called me a fraud. I walked past them in a gray suit, the small Navy insignia still pinned to my lapel. Ethan leaned toward Marshall, whispering something. Their eyes met mine, half contempt, half fear. Today wasn't about defense. It was about closure. Judge Hale's gravel voice echoed through the chamber. The defendant may present her final evidence. I stepped forward and placed the Atlantic box on the stand. The titanium drive had waited 20 years for this moment. They call me a fraud because I was silent, I began. They think silence means guilt. But in the Navy, silence has another name, duty. The screen flickered. The 2005 meeting appeared my father, Ethan Marshall, and me. My voice younger, sharper. I'll stay silent, but not forever. The courtroom froze. Marshall shot up shouting, That video's fake. Judge Hale's gavel slammed. Sit down, Mr. Price. I looked straight at him. It's not fake, Marshall. You filmed it. He fell silent. A hush settled as I continued. Operation Tide wasn't a scam. It was a classified energy project meant to save stranded naval crews. The $18 million they call embezzlement was funding that mission. The prosecutor frowned. Do you have proof the Navy authorized it? I unfolded a declassified order. All expenses under Operation Tide are classified under federal authority. Judge Hale studied the paper, then rose slowly. His voice dropped deep and steady. Commander, you're clear to proceed. No one moved. The words landed heavier than any verdict. For 15 years, I stayed silent to protect my father's name, I said. But truth doesn't need protection. It just needs to be seen. From the back row, Lila lifted her camera. Sunlight broke through the window, scattering across the floor. Then her phone rang. Her face went pale. Admiral Stonewall passed away this morning. But he left a message, 2 words. Proceed, Commander. I felt the air still. The mission was complete. Judge Hale nodded. This court will recess to verify the evidence. But, Commander Lennon, welcome back. I bowed my head. The light above shimmered like the ocean after a storm. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers. Justice doesn't need noise. It only needs a moment bright enough to be seen. The next morning, the courthouse was packed tighter than before. Reporters filled every bench, flashes cutting through the air like sparks. Veterans in uniform stood quietly in the back rows, men and women I hadn't seen in years. For the first time, no one looked at me with suspicion, only with the heavy curiosity of people about to watch truth burn through lies. The prosecutor rose first, his voice tight. Your Honor, the FBI has verified new recordings extracted from the Atlantic box. The lights dimmed, the screen flickered. Ethan's voice filled the room smooth and cold. Transfer $12 million to Marshall's account. Call it technical expenses. Marshall's voice followed lower, hesitant. And what about Tide? Ethan, delete it. Aria won't speak. She's chained by her honor. Then my father's voice, weak, breaking under guilt. If Aria's discovered, we lose everything. Keep it quiet. The faint sound of waves bled into the background, that same rhythm I'd heard outside my childhood window. A hush swept through the courtroom, as if the sea itself had arrived to testify. Judge Hale slammed the gavel once. The evidence is authenticated. This court hereby dismisses all charges against the defendant, Commander Aria Lennon. The words struck the room like thunder. Gasps, murmurs. Cameras clicked wildly. Then the sound of heavy boots echoed. Federal agents entered from the side door. Ethan Lennon, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and perjury. Marshall Price for aiding and abetting. Ethan's face drained of color. Vivian stumbled back, clutching her handbag like a shield. No, this can't be, she whispered. Ethan turned toward me, voice shaking. You ruined us. No, I said quietly. You ruined yourself. I just turned the lights back on. As the agents led them away, Marshall twisted around, desperation cracking through his composure. He forced me. Aria, he threatened to kill you if you didn't confess. I looked him in the eye, calm as the tide. No one's forcing anyone anymore, Marshall. The sea cleans up its own mess. Judge Hale rose, eyes steady on me. Commander Lennon, you've carried silence longer than anyone should. The court recognizes your service and your truth. I nodded once. Thank you, Your Honor. The room erupted outside those words, reporters shouting, microphones thrust forward. Commander Lennon, one called out. What would you say to the public now that you're free? I paused at the courthouse steps. The wind from the Kennebec River swept my hair back, salt in the air, sunlight spilling over the marble columns. Yes, I said. Truth needs no defense. For a long moment, the noise faded. The crowd blurred into a wave of sound cheers, shouts, applause, but all I heard was the rhythm of the river, steady and calm. For 20 years, I had carried my silence like a wound. Now it beat in time with the world again, slow, certain, alive. I used to fear silence. Now I know within it lives freedom. I returned to the old wooden house in Port Harrow, the one that had weathered more storms than I ever could. The sea was calm again, rolling in soft, deliberate breaths, like an old friend finally at peace. I made coffee and opened the window. The light poured in golden and kind, catching the edge of my father's photograph. For years that picture had haunted me, the stern eyes, the jaw set in duty. But standing there, I felt no anger left to give him. He had taught me about honor. I had simply taught the world that honor is not the same as silence. By late afternoon, Lila arrived with the sound of the sea still on her jacket. She handed me a printed draft, the title in bold, The Commander They Called a Fraud. I read it slowly, the way one reads something both personal and distant. At the end, she'd written, Justice was served. I crossed out the line and wrote beneath it, Justice didn't need to be served. It was waiting all along. Lila smiled, her eyes glinting in the fading light. You're still a commander, aren't you? No, I said softly. I'm just someone who used to be called one. She hugged me before leaving, her footsteps fading down the wooden steps until only the ocean remained. I stepped onto the balcony. The air was sharp with salt, the kind that stings and heals at the same time. The waves shimmered under the silver moon, each one carrying away the weight of years that had once kept me anchored to shame. For a moment, I just listened to the wind brushing the cliffs, to the creak of the old railing, to the hush that filled everything. Then I spoke barely above a whisper. That's the sound of silence when justice breathes. The moonlight slipped through the open window, landing on the small navy insignia resting on the table. Its metal glowed faintly, a quiet pulse of memory. I reached out and touched it once, then let my hand fall away. Outside, the tide was retreating, slow and steady. Not an ending, just the sea remembering how to begin again.